The old house groaned around me, it always did. But tonight, the groans felt different, deeper, like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something awful. I was alone. Been alone for a while now, suits me fine, most days. Tonight, though, the quiet was a heavy blanket, suffocating. Not a dog barking in the distance, not a car horn, just silence. A thick, oily silence that clung to everything. It was the kind of quiet that made the hairs on your arms stand up. The kind that whispered trouble was brewing. The city outside was a black hole. Streetlights were out, moon was hiding, or maybe something was hiding it. Curtains drawn tight, but the darkness still seeped in. Felt like the whole damn world had just stopped. No hum of electricity, no distant rumble of the late-night train, just a profound, unnatural stillness. My gut churned. This wasn't right, not right at all. Something was pressing down on the city, something heavy, something dark. I could feel it in my bones, a primal instinct screaming a warning. My own breathing sounded too loud in the oppressive quiet. Each inhale, a rasp. Each exhale, a sigh that did nothing to ease the tension. I paced the worn floorboards of the living room, restless, edgy like a caged animal, sensing the hunter nearby. The silence wasn't empty, it was full of unspoken threats, full of unseen eyes. I kept glancing at the windows, expecting to see something, anything, but there was only the reflection of a tired man in a dimly lit room, a man on the edge. This kind of silence, it eats at you, chews on your nerves, makes you imagine things, or maybe it just strips away the noise, lets you see what's really there. And what was there? Nothing good. I could taste the fear in the back of my throat, metallic, bitter. The world had gone quiet, and in that quiet something terrible was waking up. I knew it, didn't know how I knew it, but I did. The silence was a warning. A prelude. The silence was a pressure cooker. Building. I needed something, anything to break it. Music, news, hell, even one of those damn commercials. My eyes landed on the old radio, sitting on the dusty shelf like a forgotten relic. Bakelite casing, big round dial. Belonged to my old man, haven't turned it on in years. Tonight felt like the night. Maybe someone out there knew what was going on. Knew why the world had decided to hold its breath. Or maybe I just needed to hear a human voice. I walked over to it. My hand hesitated above the power knob. Felt foolish, like a kid scared of the dark, reaching for a nightlight. But the dread was a physical thing now. Coiling in my stomach, I clicked it on. A low hum, then static, lots of it. A hiss and crackle that filled the room, almost a relief after the crushing silence. I twisted the tuning dial, slowly, carefully, hunting for a signal, for a voice in the wilderness of noise. The static felt like a wall I had to push through. The needle crawled across the glowing frequency band. More static, a faint snatch of music quickly swallowed. Then a different kind of crackle, more urgent, sharper, like the air itself was charged. My fingers tensed on the dial. This was it. Something was trying to break through. A voice, distorted, faint, but definitely a voice, not the smooth tones of a late-night DJ. No, this was something else, something raw, something desperate. It made the short hairs on my neck prickle. The room seemed to grow colder. Or maybe it was just me. The hum of the radio was the only sound now, besides the struggling signal, waiting, listening. The anticipation was a knot in my chest. I leaned closer, straining to hear. What news would it bring? What explanation for this unholy quiet? The silence outside hadn't lifted. It was still there, pressing in, waiting. And I was waiting too, waiting for the radio to tell me what I already suspected, that the night was far from over. Then it came, clearer now, cutting through the static like a shard of glass. A man's voice, strained, terrified. This is not a test. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Cold, hard, final, not a test. My blood ran cold. Every nerve ending screamed. This wasn't some local emergency, a fire, a power outage. This was bigger, far bigger. The announcer's voice was shaking, barely holding it together. He was scared. And that scared me more than anything. This is an emergency broadcast. He repeated it, like he couldn't believe the words himself. Do not look outside. His voice cracked on the word, outside. Why? What was out there? My gaze flickered to the heavily draped windows. The urge to look was almost overwhelming. A primal curiosity mixed with a deeper, more sensible fear. Do not leave your home. The instruction was stark, absolute. A prisoner in my own house. But a prisoner from what? The silence outside suddenly felt 10 times more menacing. The voice on the radio was frantic now, gasping for breath between words. "They are here. Who are they?" The question hammered in my skull. "They are dangerous." A chilling understatement, judging by the terror in his voice. Then, the final brutal piece of advice. Aim for the head if you have a gun. Aim for the head, my mind reeled. Guns, heads. This wasn't some civil unrest. This was something else, something monstrous, something that needed to be shot in the head. Behind the announcer's breaking voice, I could hear them, screams, faint at first, then louder, not just one, many, raw, agonized, the sounds of pure, unadulterated terror, the sounds of people dying. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. The radio wasn't just reporting news, it was broadcasting the end of the world as I knew it. The screams etched themselves into my brain, a soundtrack to the unfolding nightmare. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the broadcast cut. Silence. But this time, it was worse. The radio hissed, dead air. The announcer, the screams all gone, swallowed by a sudden deafening silence. But this wasn't the quiet from before. This was a void, a vacuum left where that terrified voice had been. My breath hitched. The words echoed in my mind. Not a test. Do not look outside. They are here. Aim for the head. It was too much, too fast. My mind struggled to catch up, to process the impossible. Aliens, monsters, what the hell was happening? I stood frozen, staring at the silent radio. It felt like a cruel joke, a lifeline offered, then snatched away. The silence in the room was now charged with a new kind of dread. The knowledge of what was out there, or at least the terrifying implication. I felt a cold sweat on my palms, my throat was dry. The house, once a refuge, now felt like a trap, a flimsy wooden box in the face of an unknown hostile force. The city out there, my city, was a hunting ground. Then I heard it, faint, barely there. A sound that didn't belong, not the house settling, not the wind. No, this was different, intentional. My blood turned to ice, scratching, a dry, rasping sound like claws on wood, coming from the front door, my front door. My heart leapt into my throat. They weren't just here in the city. They were here, at my door. The warning from the radio screamed in my head, "Do not leave your home." But what if home wasn't safe anymore? The scratching came again, louder this time, more insistent, more deliberate, no mistaking it now. Whatever was out there, it knew I was inside. It was testing the boundary, probing. The terror was no longer a vague premonition or a distant broadcast. It was real, it was close, it was on the other side of a few inches of wood. The silence outside was a lie, it was just waiting, and now something was actively trying to get in. The night of terror had truly begun. The silence from the radio was a gaping wound, a raw, empty space where, just moments before, the end of the world had been announced. Then the scratching, not a mouse in the walls, not a branch against the siding. This was methodical, deliberate. Claws, I figured, long ones, dragging down the wood of my front door. My blood ran colder than the grave. They weren't just here, as the radio man had choked out. They were here, at my door, on my porch, testing, wanting in. My breath caught in my throat, a ragged, trapped thing. Every instinct screamed to run, to hide. But where? The radio's warning echoed, a grim litany in the sudden quiet. Do not look outside. Do not leave your home. Home, this old house, my fortress. Now it felt like a paper-thin barrier against whatever nightmare waited on the other side. The scratching stopped. For a beat, 2 beats, my heart hammered. A frantic drum against the silence. Then it started again, higher up the door this time, persistent, hungry. I backed away from the door, slowly, each step a lifetime. My eyes were fixed on the wood, half expecting it to splinter inwards at any second. The silence outside, the one that had been so heavy before, now felt different. It wasn't empty, it was watching, waiting. The scratching was the only sound in the universe, a countdown to something unimaginable. My mind raced, a frantic blur of fear and disbelief. This couldn't be happening. Not here, not to me. But the sound was undeniable, real and terrifyingly close. The radio's words kept looping. They are dangerous. Aim for the head. The sheer anachronism of it all. Aim for the head? What in God's name was I supposed to be aiming at? What kind of creatures scratched at doors in the dead of night, heralded by screams on a dying radio wave? The questions piled up, each one heavier than the last. But there was no time for answers, only for survival. The scratching paused again. A new sound followed, a low, guttural snuffling right at the bottom of the door. Fear can freeze you or light a fire. I was frozen outside, burning inside. This wasn't just an animal. This was intelligent, hunting. My old man's service revolver, locked away for emergencies. This qualified. I moved towards the back bedroom, the old chest. Rusted latch, it sprang open, the .38 Special Cold Steel. I picked it up. The snuffling stopped. A heavy thud against the door. I snapped the cylinder shut. I had a gun. Now what? The thudding stopped. Silence again. But this silence was worse. It was the silence of something gathering itself, something deciding its next move. I stood in the hallway, the .38 heavy in my hand, my knuckles white. Every nerve was frayed. Every shadow seemed to dance with malevolent intent. The front door held for now, but for how long? The wood was old, solid oak, but still just wood. Against what? I didn't dare imagine. I just knew it was strong, and it wanted in. Then a flicker of movement from the corner of my eye. The living room window, the one that faced the street. Curtains drawn tight, but a sliver of light from somewhere cast long dancing shadows across the fabric, not shadows from trees swaying in the wind. There was no wind. These were different, taller, thinner, moving with an unnatural grace. Or maybe it was just my fear playing tricks on me, making monsters out of moonlight and shifting darkness. But the radio had said, "Do not look outside." My heart pounded, a wild drum against my ribs. The warning was clear, but the not knowing was a torment of its own. What was out there? What were these things that had silenced a city, that clawed at doors and made announcers sob in terror? The urge to see, to understand, was a powerful gravitational pull, a moth to a flame, knowing it could be deadly, but unable to resist the fatal curiosity. The shadows outside shifted again, closer to the window this time. Longer, more defined. I crept towards the window, each step a gamble. The floorboards seemed to cry out my position with every creak. The .38 was slick with sweat in my grip. I told myself I needed to know, needed to see what I was up against. If they were going to break in, I needed to know what was coming. It was a flimsy excuse. The truth was, the terror of the unknown was becoming unbearable. The shadows paused right outside the thin fabric barrier, as if they knew I was there, as if they were waiting for me to look. My hand reached for the curtain, trembling, cold with fear. I pulled it back just an inch, enough to see the nightmare outside. Mrs. Henderson, or what was left of her, sprawled on her lawn. Two impossibly thin, pale creatures hunched over her, tearing, ripping, blood everywhere. Their heads were elongated, featureless except for huge, black, glowing eyes. One looked up, blood dripping, and turned toward me, toward my window. I dropped the curtain, bile rising, the image burned into my mind. The night was just beginning, and they knew I was here. Henderson was gone. My house felt paper thin, no longer a sanctuary. Silence coiled outside, then crash, glass shattering in the kitchen. No more games, they were coming in. I gripped the .38, heart pounding, moving towards the noise. Another crash, wood splintering, the back door torn open. One of them squeezed through, taller, thinner than any man, its black eyes scanning my home. It was inside, my sanctuary was breached. The night of terror had found its way indoors. It moved with a jerky, inhuman gait, towering in my kitchen. The stench, rot and ozone made me gag. Its head tilted, those black eyes fixed on me, unblinking. My hand shook on the .38. "Aim for the head," the radio had said, but where was the head? It stepped closer, claws twitching, assessing me. I raised the gun, barely able to steady it. It hissed and lunged. Too fast to think, only instinct. I squeezed the trigger, the gun's roar deafening in the small room. The shot hit its torso. It shrieked, a psychic scream that rattled my bones. Black fluid oozed from the wound, but it only seemed angrier. It lunged again, claws slashing the air where I'd been. I stumbled, glass crunching underfoot, the kitchen a wreck. Another crash from the living room, more of them coming. Despair threatened to drown me as it cornered me by the sink. Its breath was fetid, its eyes inches from mine, claws raised. One last chance, I tightened my grip on the trigger. Aim for the head. The words echoed as its claws reached for me. I thrust the gun up and fired, point blank at its smooth alien dome. The bullet struck cracked spiderwebbing across its head. Black ichor seeped, phosphorescent mist vented out. It convulsed, limbs thrashing, then collapsed in a twitching heap. Silence fell, thick and heavy, broken only by my ragged breathing. I stared at the corpse, the .38 still smoking in my hand, but the sounds from the living room were getting closer. The kitchen was a charnel house, the alien corpse oozing black ichor. The stench was overwhelming, metallic and foul, scrabbling, clicking, more of them in the living room closing in. I checked the gun, 4 bullets left. My fortress was gone, every exit a death trap. I shook, adrenaline fading, fear sharpening. I had to move now before they found me. The hallway or the bedrooms. Every choice felt fatal. The alien lay dead, but there was no time to breathe. The living room erupted with noise, more of them, coming fast. The kitchen was a cage. The front and back doors were useless. My only hope, the tiny pantry window. I dragged a chair, fumbled the latch, shoved it open. As they crashed into the kitchen, I squeezed through, glass scraping my skin. I tumbled into the backyard, gasping, the taste of dirt and ash in my mouth. Out of the house, out of the frying pan, the fire awaited. I scrambled to my feet. The .38 was still clutched in my hand. My backyard was a mess. Beyond the broken fence, the street. A strange, eerie luminescence painted everything. It was them. Fires burned sporadically. A car engulfed in flames down the block. I crept to the edge of my property. The scene was one of utter desolation. Houses stood with doors agape, and the bodies strewn across lawns, in doorways. My neighbours, reduced to things. Mr. Peterson lay near his prized rose bushes. The air was thick with the scent of blood and smoke. A low, guttural growl echoed nearby. I ducked lower. Shadows moved. Tall, thin, unnaturally fast. The same kind of creatures I'd seen. But more, many more. They were hunting my street, my home, now a slaughterhouse. I was exposed here. Every shadow was a threat. The world I knew had vanished. Where could I go? The radio's warning, do not leave your home, too late for that. Now the streets were a new kind of hell. This wasn't just an attack, it was an extermination, a brutal cleansing of humanity, and I was just one survivor in an alien apocalypse. I had to move. Staying put was suicide. The creatures were sweeping the area methodically. I pressed myself against the shadows, using wrecked cars for cover. Each step was a gamble. My street felt alien, hostile. How did it happen so fast? One minute I was a man alone, the next a hunted animal, a flicker of movement, one of them stalking. It hadn't seen me. Pure luck. This city was no longer a haven, it was a hunting ground. The night stretched before me, an endless expanse of terror. The silence pressed in. Isolation was a crushing weight. Every nerve screamed to remain unseen. What I'd seen, Henderson. Images burned into my mind. Was there any hope of escape? I moved cautiously, a ghost in my city. The .38 felt heavier. Something resisted. The will to live. Then, a flicker, a small, steady light in a window, a tiny ember of hope ignited. I started moving towards that ghost of hope. That distant light, a pinprick in the suffocating blackness. It could be a trap, but it was the only sign that wasn't death. My feet moved towards it through graveyard streets, every shadow dancing with unseen terrors. This city had become their hunting ground. I kept the .38 ready. 4 bullets left. The light pulled me, a moth to a dying flame, from a second-story window of an old warehouse. My hand tightened on the .38. I found a fire escape to the window. The light within, a steady, warm glow, man-made. Was this temporary refuge or death's other door, the unknown within or the certain hell without? I found a loose pane of glass, pried it open, slipped inside. The room was small, dusty, filled with forgotten crates. And in the center, a single lantern burned. No one here, just the lantern and the silence. A silence that felt heavy, expectant. This wasn't safety, it was a pause. So what now? Huddle here? Wait for the dawn that might never come? What could one man do anyway? One man with 4 bullets? Hiding felt like the only sane option, but sanity was a luxury I couldn't afford. The alternative, fight. But the thought of cowering, while they butchered their way through my city, the radio announcer's desperate plea echoed, aim for the head. It wasn't just advice, it was a command to stand, to resist. This dusty room, this flickering lantern, it was a crossroads. The choice had to be made, and soon, because this fragile haven wouldn't stay safe for long. The flickering lantern light painted the grimy walls with dancing shadows, each shadow a ghost of what was lost. This city, she was a violated corpse, picked clean by vultures from another world. The loss was a hollow ache. This small room felt like a tomb. The city was screaming and I was hiding, hunted, exterminated. Was there anyone else out there fighting? My own struggle felt so small. Hope, a fool's currency. The lantern flame was small but defiant. My conscience began to stir. Was it enough to just live? The faces of the dead stared back at me. Do I save my own skin or do I spit in the eye of the monster? The choice hung in the air like a loaded gun. The lantern flame sputtered, a tiny star in the encroaching darkness. Each flicker cast my shadow upon the grime-caked walls. I knew I couldn't stay. Before I faced what came next, there was something I had to do. A final gesture, a message in a bottle. If anyone survived, they needed to know the truth. I rummaged through a discarded crate and found a piece of cardboard and a burnt piece of wood. They're here. Trust no one. Fight for your life. If anyone was looking for a sign, then I prepared to meet the darkness. Meet the... The silence deepened. Every creak sounded like a footfall. The city was their playground, and they were sweeping every inch of it. Then it began with scratching. Faint at first, slower, more patient, more deliberate. My hand went to the .38 in my belt. 4 bullets left. They were close, right outside. They knew something was in here. This was it, cornered. They were surrounding the building. The darkness, it was hungry.